Little Christopher was asleep, but he didn't look like one of those warm, snuggly 2-year-olds who looked like he was just in heaven with a little smile on his face. No, little Christopher was a mess. He stank of urine and feces. His little hands were curled up in fists and were bloody. His face was tracked with dried tears. He was locked in a dark closet, and he was afraid of the dark. And he knocked and screamed for his mother, but no one had heard him over the loud music playing in the next room. He'd been in the closet for 5 hours. He'd been hungry. He'd needed to use the bathroom. He was desperate, but finally now he was asleep. Martina hadn't intended to cause any harm. She thought locking her son in the closet would keep him safe because a party where people were drinking really wasn't a safe place for a 2-year-old. But she got drunk early at the party and she forgot to check in on him. She didn't really realize how long he'd been by himself in that closet. And she was having such a good time. Maybe she didn't really care that much if he wanted out because she worked so hard every day during the week, working, stocking shelves all day long in the factory for minimum wage, yelled at if she talked to anybody, lonely and bored all day long until the weekend. The weekend, she could finally just do what she wanted. And what she liked to do was have parties. And what she liked to do was drink. And if you asked her if she was an alcoholic, she'd just laugh and say no. But she was. Once she tasted just a little drop of alcohol, she couldn't stop until she was drunk. Blackouts were frequent. If she saw signs about alcohol, advertisements, she really longed to drink. And once she began to drink, she was a very neglectful parent because she couldn't think about anything. So anyway, it was one of those weekends where she locked the kid in the closet and figured he was safe and was just having a good time and chilling. And there was a knock on the door. She didn't know it, but Christopher had come to call. She'd met Christopher 2 years earlier at another party at somebody else's house. Their eyes had met across the crowded party room. He was so good looking, and he came towards her like a magnet. And they danced for hours and drank, and she invited him back to her apartment. And it was glorious. 2 days of fabulous sex. Until suddenly, Christopher jumped up and said, "Oh my God, I forgot. I got to get home. I got to pack. I'm moving." And he rushed out the door. He didn't remember that he didn't have her phone number. She didn't have his phone number. They'd both been so drunk. They'd been so drunk that she'd forgotten she had condoms in one of the drawers in her bedroom, and he forgot that he always had condoms in his wallet. And Christopher was out the door and he moved, and Martina found out that she was pregnant, but she had no way of contacting him. And now it's 2 years later, and he's knocking and knocking, and he hears there's a party. So finally he just turns the doorknob. The door's open. He comes in. He hears the sound of the party, but he's wearing a heavy coat. So first he's going to hang his coat up. And it's kind of weird. The door's locked. He just remembered it as a coat closet. Who locks coat closets? But he unlocks the door and he opens the door, and Wow, did it stink? And he turned on the light to see what was up in this closet, and there was little Christopher asleep, stinking to high heaven. Christopher felt something was really wrong with this, so he walked into the party and said, "Hey, whose kid is in the closet?" And everybody ignored him. And he walked up to Martina and he said, "Hey, whose kid is in the closet? This kid needs attention." She turned to him laughing and she goes, "Well, Christopher, hello. I see you've met your son, Chris." This was just the start of the big fight. Christopher was furious that he'd been a father for 2 years and hadn't even known it, and his little kid was in the closet and clearly needed attention. Martina was furious. "I've been taking care of this kid all the time for 2 years without you. You didn't call me. If you called me like you promised, I would have told you you were a dad." They No sense is being is happening in this conversation. They're just screaming at each other. Little Chris wakes up. He stumbles out of the closet and he's so thirsty and he sees all the bottles of beer and he grabs one and begins to drink. It tastes terrible, but he's so thirsty and nobody even notices. Most people are dancing, but some people are watching the big fight. These default parents have caused a lot of harm. Little Chris has been really neglected, and now he's drinking alcohol. It is seriously, personally neglectful to have sex with someone who you don't know. Christopher didn't know that Martina was an alcoholic, and Martina didn't know that Christopher was just a player who liked to have lots of sex and who never intended to call her. Christopher just took for granted that she recognized that this was just kind of a hookup, and that when he said he was going to call her, that's just what everybody says. Default parents have caused harm to little Chris. Little Chris needs care. Little Chris needs care whether his parents have boring days at work at the factory or get ordered around a lot in his IT job. It doesn't matter. Little Chris needs help. He needs help now. But all they're thinking about is blaming each other. This is a serious problem. We need to increase awareness by providing really effective sex education programs in all of our schools so everybody learns that if you aren't ready to be a parent, but you're having sex, you need to always use responsible birth control. We need to increase awareness that it's okay to drink, but becoming an alcoholic causes serious problems to you, to your families, and if you have children, to your children. Friends stop their friends from drinking too much. Everyone needs to know that having alcohol at a party is okay, but you need to supervise your friends. And if you care about them, you don't let them get drunk and become parents by default. Default parents cause child neglect and child abuse.